morning, everybody. I'm Janet Parker, the Director of Business Development and Marketing for Innovate Mississippi, and I'd like to welcome you to our 6th webinar in our series for startups and small businesses. I'm excited to introduce our speaker today, Carrie Goetz, who approached us recently wanting to help get involved with Innovate Mississippi. As you all probably know, we work with entrepreneurs using a Coach and Connect model. Connecting our entrepreneurs to resources and experts in particular areas to help you grow your businesses. And we can't do this without support of people like Carrie and our other mentors and service providers. If you need help with a startup, please reach out to Tasha Bibb, our Director of Entrepreneurial Development, at tbibb@innovate.ms, or you can go to our website at innovate.ms and fill out an intake form and someone will reach out to you. Also, if you'd like to get involved as a sponsor, we have an event coming up, Accelerate. It's going to be virtual this year, November 10th through the 11th. Or if you just want to help support our mission financially, we're a nonprofit, you can contact me, Janet Parker, at jparker@innovate.ms. Now I'd like to give you a little bit more background about our speaker. There's so much to say, so I'm just going to kind of summarize this, but Carrie Goetz is the principal and CTO for Strategic IT Com. Carrie, I'm sorry if I butchered that, you might correct me. She has nearly 40 years of global experience designing, running, and auditing data centers, IT departments, smart cities, intelligent buildings, so much more. She's an internationally recognized keynote speaker and podcaster with a background in programming, networking, and consulting as a Fortune 500 IT executive. Now she provides technical direction and strategic planning and was recently named the Inside Analytics 2020 Top 10 Most Influential Women in Tech. So very impressive. There's so much more to say about Carrie. You can find more details about her on our website. But I can tell you this, you're going to learn a lot today. So have your notebooks ready. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to Carrie.
Hi, thanks everybody, and thanks for tuning in. So a little bit about me. I did start Strategicom. I capitalized the IT and it kind of changed. Everybody goofs up the pronunciation there, so sorry for throwing that on you. But anyway, we launched CTO as a service really as a means to provide technical advice and assistance for people that really need some technical help, but don't have enough for a full-time position. So a day a week, a day a month, those kind of things. So that's what that CTO as a service is. But we have a lot of different services. And today we're going to talk a little bit about technology procurement and some magic that you may not know. And there's some things, that can definitely provide you some savings. So I will say this presentation is designed to be very prescriptive. And so there's a lot of words on some of these slides. I'm happy to make this slide deck available to you in a PDF. I'll give you my contact information at the end. Just shoot me an email and I'll send it out to you. But hopefully it'll help you as you start along your paths. A little bit about me. I do have a podcast. It's Careers for Women, Trades, and Vets in Tech. And it covers literally all of the careers that are available across the technology spectrum and data centers. So, the idea here really is an outreach project. So for kids, people in junior high, all that kind of stuff. And even you, if you're looking at changing careers or thinking about different careers, I hope you tune in and feel free to share that. If you're working with a Girl Scout troop or a Boy Scout troop for their tech badges, it's all G-rated content. And then on the right, you'll see these are the countries where I've done projects. So I literally have been all over the globe doing these projects. It's nice to be back in Mississippi and not living on an airplane 50 weeks a year. So anyway, as we go through this, I want this to be interactive. Feel free to throw questions in the chat bot. Janet's going to help us out with the questions there. So as we talk about technology procurement, I really want you to understand this is everything. It's not just going and buying a laptop for your company. It's really the whole IT stack that's going to be involved. And this could be cloud. Certainly a lot of smaller businesses start out in the cloud because it keeps them from having to have that hardware themselves. Data center space, what you're doing for hardware, software, your voice systems, how, are you going to do online voice? Are you going to have, voice mixed with communications? Zoom is one we have all gotten really familiar with, certainly through the pandemic, but there's other ones out there and they all have different benefits. Some will do transcriptions for you. I mean, there's all kinds of different things. Security and cybersecurity, I cannot stress this enough. You should never do anything in IT without having a plan for your security and your cybersecurity. And I know the last cast here in Innovate Mississippi was talking about some of that security, but definitely that's got to be a plan. And then services too, if you're hiring programmers or other people, and then what we do with consultants as well. And so understanding procurement, a lot of larger organizations have an entire procurement department. Some have the IT department that sort of watches its own procurement. And I really sort of left this large procurement piece in here because I think as innovators and people that are starting companies, you're probably going to be interfacing with both anyway. So it doesn't hurt for you to understand kind of how those work as you move forward. So really, as you're looking at your procurement for your company, and what you definitely want to encourage from people that you're trying to supply to is that value matters more than price. The cheapest thing is not always the best thing. And I think we've all been bitten by that in the past. Acquisitions and mergers don't stop. So it's really of benefit to you to figure out who's buying who, because in some cases, it may be that a company acquired one of your competitors, but they're not on a particular company's procurement list. So that may open some doors for you. And you also have to understand that, and I think this is one of the worst things that happens in technology right now, is that people get in a very reactive mode and we don't allow ourselves the time to properly shop whatever we're going to procure for our business. And so we want to be really, really careful. And we also need to understand that on the supply side, they also want to do just in time. So they don't want a bunch of products sitting on a shelf, whether that be with distribution or the manufacturer themselves, because having inventory sit around is very expensive to carry on your books. And so we want to be able to forecast as best we can with our suppliers and let them know what we're looking for. And then they become business partners. I mean, anybody can sell you parts. That's not really what you want. What you want is those people that are going to be business partners and really help suss out what's going to work for your business. You, as a consumer and also as a potential supplier, really need to expect agility. You've got to be flexible and working through integrations. Problems are going to come up. You've got to be transparent. If there's a problem, everybody has problems. There's no project that goes without a hitch. There's always something. And the trick is not something. The trick is how you deal with that something when it happens. And then you also have to remember that getting into a technology, you may not use that technology forever for the life of your company. And so having that exit strategy is just as important as what you're going to start out with. So as we start thinking about procuring technology, who do we rely on? So we start with our employees, and we have to understand that all of us as humans, there's things, we want to build a resume, for instance. And so employees may have a little slanted view. And also, if you don't give your employees the time and the attention and the support to go out and investigate options, you're going to get the easiest one that falls on their plate. And that may not be the best for you either. Vendors are always going to push the latest and greatest technology. While that may be great for some companies, that's probably not always the case for all companies. Matter of fact, I can guarantee it's not. And so whatever your vendors recommend, you have to temper that with, is this really just them pushing the latest and greatest, or does this really provide a benefit? And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Consultants, you can hire consultants to work for you. The nice thing about that is they become disinterested third parties at that point. Those are the best folks that you can rely on if you're trying to seek outside advice. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. Interested third parties are people that bring something to the table, and they're certainly going to bring solutions to the table, but they get paid on those solutions. And so that may kind of impact their sphere of influence a little bit. Peers, networking groups, and associations are always good. If you've got a great technical procurement department, that's awesome. The problem is most procurement departments are not technical. And in a lot of cases, they're incentivized on savings, which may or may not be of your benefit because it honestly might get you in a solution that doesn't do what you want it to do. Trade publications, if you just love reading, there's a lot of those out there. Word of mouth, looking at what, other peer companies or folks that you trust, what's working for them, certainly helps. And then brokers are a great way to do. Brokers have a multitude of solutions they can bring to the table and, help you figure out which one you want. And they're just like hiring a real estate person, to help you find a house. They're paid by the other party. And so that's free guidance right there. So when we talk about employees, we need to understand that sometimes employees do resume stack. They pick something because it's going to be the best on their resume if they're looking to move. That's, not always what you want. Certifications are a great thing that vendors do to really sort of incentivize folks to use your product or their product or service. They'll add on some certifications. And, if you're a company and that's important to you to have those, absolutely, that's something that's a tangible you can take advantage of that might be good for you. And then, but you also have to understand too, that as you start certifying your employees, sometimes that really locks you into a single vendor solution, and that may or may not be the way that you want to go. Vendor assistance, how much there's a lot of times where vendors give you specifications, they give them to engineering firms, they're cut and paste into a document, it makes it easy, but there's stuff in those specifications that may not be of your best interest, and we'll talk a little bit more about that too. And again, you've got to have that time for research. Some people just wing it and they try something and see if it works, but depending on how you get out, that's not always good. And again, like I said, brokers are certainly a great way to do that, and help with the easy button sort of to get there. Supplier relationship management, everybody does this differently. Some suppliers are really great after the sale. Some suppliers, I hear this all the time. Well, we bought this and then we never heard from them again. That's definitely not what you want. And the problem is that a lot of companies, once they start with a vendor, they keep repeating it. Also, there's things with vendors that lock you in. So from a smart city perspective, a good example is there's some vendors that work with the GIS packages or the graphical information system, geographical information systems. So for like E911 and stuff, and then they start stacking on top of that. Well, the problem is that really locks you into that vendor. And so if you ever want to use somebody outside, you can't do that. And the same thing happens with some of the interoperability stuff. RFIs, or requests for information, absolutely are your friend. You want to start with your vendor scorecards early in the process and move forward. If you set a short deadline, expect to have problems. It's just going to happen because you really don't have time to suss those things out. And then, views on available products, the latest and greatest. I hate this new and improved thing. Also terms like first to market, best to market, all of that means literally nothing. Don't fall for it. And, again, brokers certainly help. Consultants, if you hire a consultant, we certainly do that work. That means that you're paying somebody to go find the best solution for you. It can really help if you've got some time issues, but if you're going to get a consultant, they absolutely need to be a disinterested third party. And, there are some consultants that get paid by manufacturers. They get rebates and incentives for speccing certain products. If that's the case, they should disclose that up front. I'm wholeheartly against people that don't. And because I think at that point, it should be your option. And lip service, if you are hiring a consultant, for instance, to write specifications for you, or equal can definitely be viewed as lip service. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that. But anytime that you have a consultant that's using cut and paste specifications, you need to understand how they're getting to those products for you to make sure that they're not just hitting that easy button and going after the vendors that have supplied them stuff. And we see this all the time in engineering where, some of the engineers out there have always designed things the same exact way because those vendors call on them. And that's the only products they ever specify. They don't go out there and look for new and cool different stuff. And I think, understanding how they get to that marketplace and how they get to those solutions is really important for you. Disinterested third parties are the best. Those are the ones that really have no vested financial interest in whatever you pick. So if you hire a consultant and, stipulate that this consultant can get literally no kickback, I say kickback, that's a kind of a nasty term, but they get no rebate or they're not incentivized to bring a solution, Brokers are a good example of that, although brokers definitely get paid by the companies that provide that, and they should disclose to you if they get paid more for one solution than another. But disinterested third parties, really on the consulting side, and the ones that do nothing or get no benefit out of that other than what you're paying them to do the consulting. If you're new to technology, sometimes that is absolutely the best way to go. Procurement can certainly help in those, and help in those solutions, just like I said, vet those out to make sure that it is truly a disinterested third-party service. And that's a very different service. Brokers, like I said, they get paid by the vendors. And most of them have, like, I don't know, in our portfolio, we have roughly 200 different vendors for every cloud, data center service, all of that kind of stuff. We fully disclose if we get paid more for one solution than another, but we believe that all of our customers deserve options for what they're putting in. And so we can help shortcut that. I mean, if you take SD-WAN, for instance, which is software defined wide area networking, if you guys don't know, but it's how you get from point A to point B. There's a million solutions out there. And so being able to use that broker and understand what some of these are, they'll work with you to find out specifically what your business needs are, and they can shortcut some of that. But if you're a struggling business or you're just starting up and you don't have money for a consultant, brokers are a great way to really get that technology solution without having to pay for the consulting fees. So value versus price. I love this quote. I think it's one of the better ones. The bitterness of poor quality remains long after the sweetness of low price is forgotten. And that's really true. So you have to be able to say, look, if we can't afford a good value solution, maybe the cheapest way is not to go. Maybe the deal is you don't pull the plug then. Maybe you go back to the drawing board and you look a little bit more, or you look for other solutions. And so, the cheapest is not the best. And as you guys start working on different projects and things, you'll figure out that if you're bidding against something and everybody expects the lowest price, your margin goes down. So it's probably not the best for you either moving forward. And so we want to make sure that we understand the quality of what we're getting. And that's really where this RFI cycle is just so amazing. And so we also want to understand our supply chain. So if we go out and we buy a laptop from a distributor, that distributor is going to have a markup, as they should, because they're going to handle the paperwork, the credit, the stocking or whatever they do. But you also want to understand what that is. And so in some cases, you'll find that, especially in distribution, they might get rebates at the end of the year for selling more of one manufacturer's product than they do another. And so guess which one they're going to steer you towards? They're going to steer you towards the one that they get the best rebates on. And so the best thing you can do, if you can do it, is to try to get pricing from a manufacturer and then look at distribution and see what those markups are. And certainly on larger projects, you can do that. Manufacturing is a great example. If you decide that you're going to have a product or a service and a product that's going to be OEM'd out to different companies to do manufacturing, this is a great way to do that. You can go to different manufacturers and figure out what that is, and then you can shop it into distribution. If you're getting a cable plant, for instance, and say, well, we're going to get this from a distributor and there's 10 different types of cable that we can buy from that distributor, you really want to know how that distributor is being compensated for that cable sitting on a shelf. If it's small projects, it's not as big a deal. But if you get in a big project where you're building a big building or something, it's absolutely a big deal. And so just understand, there's not a one size fits all. And nobody should say, well, this is what everybody's doing. And they do that a lot in marketing. Let us dangle all these little nuggets of, who's using our product, and that's going to sway you to use our product. You should never buy a product that way. So understanding that rebates exist. So sometimes you have, again, specifiers that get paid to specify a product. You have distribution that gets incentivized. You have installers who pick certain products for you because they get rebates from a manufacturer. You have, on the services side, some of the voice over IP guys work with people that do voice over IP services. They give them rebates. To me, if those rebates are coming on this project off of your money, that should be your rebate. It shouldn't go to somebody else. But you just need to know that. Now, I said or equal tends to be lip service, and a lot of consultants will list out a certain manufacturer's bits and pieces, and they'll put an or equal on there for a bid. And this is what happens in real life. If you're bidding on those projects or bidding on those particular products, then you'll recognize who that one vendor is. And so, or equal, you just assume, since that's the specifications that are listed, that or equal is kind of lip service, and people really don't want that or equal solution. I will say this though, especially as you're starting out procuring tech, you always want to give incentives for somebody that can give you a like-minded solution that provides the same functionality, and allow people to bid options, because you get all of this creative ways of doing things. And companies that have been in business for a long time know different ways to lay out a network, or know different ways to design a data center, or know other things that provide you really, really great benefit. Like, I was working with a bank in Australia, and what the vendor proposed was about $33 million worth of hardware. And we changed not the functionality, but we changed, and instead of putting 2 switches in the top of every rack, we put a couple at the end of the row that would serve the whole row, because that's what the power requirements were. It cut $25 million off that purchase. Had that end user not asked for or equal options, they never would have seen that option. And so those are those kind of incentives, and you need to word that in your request for information proposal, and even your request for quotes, to allow those people and give them incentives and bonuses for bringing something to you that will serve what you want, but gives you extra benefit, different benefits, whatever. And so you also, you know, the trick here is you want to know what you ask for. And so, but you don't want to be so prescriptive in what you ask for that you discourage options, or you limit yourself to something very finite and small. So you might say, you know, company A would like the products and services necessary to deliver voice over IP to 30 phones with the following functionality. Extra points will be given to additional options and features that are outside, but, you know, would be deemed necessary or good to have for the business. And so you also need to understand what you need, like bare bottom line, what you want, and then you can get all this other cool stuff. And in some cases, like if you're doing software development or you're looking for a new software tool, you might find another company that has features that are included with the same functionality that you asked for at no cost. Or you might find that another company will code that for you at no cost to go with it, just to match that bid. And so this is that part, you know, if you start with this RFI, you can really start building on those requirements. And like I said, get rid of marketing speak. It's garbage. I'm first, new and improved, whatever. If they list a feature or a functionality, there should be a tangible benefit to that feature and functionality. Some of that stuff is just, you know, like I've seen where they, you know, in a specification, they list a certain PAL color because they know nobody else has that exact color. Does that color really change the functionality? No. But you might pay, you know, pay 3 or 4 times more for a certain color than another color. So things like that, you have to decide what's really important. And you also have to decide if it's been vetted. So we have standards that give us sort of a least common denominator, but you want to make sure it's tangible. So here's a good example. If I write an RFI and I say, you know, my vendor said, you know, you need to make sure that all of the cars you're getting pricing on have 260 miles an hour on the speedometer. Because that's what that vendor has. You're knocking out probably 90% of the cars on the market. But if you know that you're only really going to be going 75 miles an hour and 90% of the cars on the market have 160 or 140 on the speedometer, whatever that number is, I'm not a car person, and you change it, you've just opened up to 90% of the other manufacturers on the market. You're not going to be able to do 260 miles an hour, certainly not here. And if you happen to be, you know, someplace where it's, you know, a gravel road, you're definitely not going to do that. So you have to understand your environment and understand if that feature provides you really something tangible that you can use. We also have to be really careful of selective text examples. If you're a parent, you know that there's a big, big difference between your kid asking if they can have a bowl of ice cream and what they really mean by a bowl of ice cream. And so if they are claiming something, we want to be sure that it's something verifiable, that we really know, and there's not something else that can do better, and that we're not just hitting that easy button by taking something directly from a manufacturer. We have codes and standards for a reason. So codes are certainly important. If we have very specific codes that are something we have to live by, you can't get around that, right? You have to adhere to those codes. Standards, if something is standards compliant, it means that it meets everything in that standard. And so that really is sort of a level of protection that, you know, there's going to be interoperability, for instance. So everything Ethernet, if it's all standards based, will all work with everything Ethernet, you know, those kind of things. And so you have to figure out which of those standards are important to you. But understand, any company that goes that extra step of having something standards verified, there's a cost to that. And so their product may not be as cheap as somebody that skips that step altogether. And you also have to understand what exactly they had verified in the standards, because sometimes it's different than what they're selling. And so we also have to understand that everything tech is an ecosystem. There is no island unto himself. And so as we figure out this whole ecosystem, we have to realize that everything is going to interface with something else. And especially as we start talking about internet and cloud and how all that interfaces with different applications, you might see a solution that you think is a really, really great solution, but you have already invested in this accounting package and it doesn't interface with that accounting package, and it's going to cost you a fortune to make that happen. Now, it might be that there's an accounting module you could add on to this one and you move from your accounting package, but understanding how all of that relationship and the things talk to each other definitely is important. So this is what gets us to the RFI. And the RFI, I think, is super important. This is where we ask the question, we go out to folks and have them bring their solutions to us and answer the questions and answer what they have as it comes to us. And then we can vet those manufacturers. We can figure out about supply chain and all of that stuff that we talked about. And there's lots of different examples of an RFI, but you know, it may be that you do an RFI and then you find out that, wow, I didn't even know all this stuff was out there. This could be so great for me. And then you build a second RFI and go out again and figure out who can supply all of that stuff for you. And so the supply chain, like I said, you know, understanding where those rebates are, who's influencing those decisions. The RFI is really the time to start asking some of these questions, like, you know, what have you done for interoperability testing? What custom features are allowed? All that kind of good stuff, different tax codes and things. You know, one thing that I did learn writing a furniture selection package, you know, for one of those manufacturers where you pick your sofa style and you pick the fabric that goes on it, is that couches are considered luxury items in a lot of states and there's different taxes on there. Who would have thunk? So, you know, those are the kind of things that you start finding out throughout the process. And then set up vendor interviews. If you're working with a broker, the broker will help do this. But the idea is to make sure that they bring somebody technical and somebody from the sales side, because you will find sometimes that no matter how well-meaning salespeople are, that sometimes they'll promise things that technical says can't happen. A good example, one time when I was working with this coding project, the sales guy said they could absolutely change the key field to an alphanumeric, and the whole entire program was written around numerics only. So it would have meant literally rewriting the entire package. The software guy said, oh yeah, you know, it'd be no problem. Or the sales guy, the software guy said, oh, no, we can't do that. So those are the kind of things that you figure throughout the interviews. And then you also start narrowing down the things that are critical for you to have, nice to have, and figure out, you know, maybe this becomes part of your technology roadmap. Maybe you start out with module A and B day one. Maybe within a year, you start budgeting and planning for module B or C or other things. But this is kind of where you start doing that, really view the vendor interviews more as a brainstorming session than, you know, grilling somebody, right? And so you also get to figure out here the sphere of influence for the product. How is it distributed? Where's the stock? Do they pay rebates to distribution? Do they pay rebates to installers? What happens if that brand is not available at, you know, halfway through your project? Are there alternate brands that you could use and work with for some of that technology? Do you Sustainability is a big thing now. What is your sustainability plan? And for a lot of consumers, that's a big part of the process, is making sure that you're buying and sourcing products from companies that have like minds to you. So if, sustainability is important, you can ask these things. And then life cycle management is also a big thing. So we start really at the RFI, and we want to make sure that we understand the full life of the product. Now, that's not to say that you only do business with people that have been in business for a long time. Sometimes there's new companies that have spun out of bigger companies that really spun out because they have great ideas based on other stuff. You just need to understand the expertise of the people involved in the, in that company, but also understand what the change process is. So, and how often it's updated. So you might find out that this one manufacturer of product A has a 3-year end of life, and this one might have a 5-year end of life. Well, if you're trying to budget and start out on a new company, that 5-year end of life might be better for you. You also might decide that the 3-year is better because this 5-year guy, you have to update the software and you have to update firmware, every month or something. And so it's going to be a drain on resources. And these are the kind of things we start figuring out. And then also figure out what happens if you want to leave. And cloud is a great example. It's cheap to get in the cloud. They cost you nothing to put your data up there. Getting out of the cloud, completely different scenario. And so they do charge you to pull it out. And so you might decide that you're going to do some cloud, some local. You might decide, what your different options are and do some comparisons here. And I will say with cloud services right now, they're highly competitive, and sometimes these are negotiating points, but just understand as you start building this and building your tech infrastructure, it's going to grow. Dropbox is a great example. Dropbox ended up paying about $8 million a month in cloud fees, and now they're building out their own data centers. So, there's a point where this is economically feasible for you, but moving down the line as you grow, it might get to the point where it's an oh no instead of a oh yeah. So you want to be able to figure out some of that life cycle and what that's going to do for you. And then project specifics. Do they have in-region labor? What requirements do they have of you? And this is one of the most important questions you can ask in an RFI, an RFQ, an RFP. What do you need from us to make this project successful? Because there's nothing worse than starting and getting halfway through a project and all of a sudden you realize that they need more hours of you than you ever anticipated providing. And so then it becomes a big issue for you. And so again, the life cycle thing, time constraints, what do you do for escalations if there's a problem? Like, how do I get from the local guy on up? So do is what I say. Make sure that you do due diligence through whatever solutions that you're looking at. And then from a procurement specific thing, you got to understand not everybody's an expert at everything. So if you're working with procurement folks, give them the ammunition they need to help you out. And also understand from your employee perspective, or even if you're selling into another company, people hate change. And you have to manage that and make that easy. And so I used to have this one customer, and his deal was 5 whys. Anytime they went through a new purchase, he had to go through 5 whys. Why are we buying from this company? Because we always have. That's not a good enough answer. We're buying from this company because when we had downtime last year, they sent in 3 people at no cost and helped us out. That's absolutely a tangible, and that's something that's a reason to continue to do business with people. So just kind of keep that in mind. This should be, anytime you're procuring tech, and as you use tech, it should be a continuous improvement cycle. You should be able to work with your vendors, and your vendors absolutely should be a business partner in your decisions. And this is from Dartmouth. It's really sort of talks about the 7 steps of effective decision-making. And I won't go through all of these, but very much like this whole RFI process, you identify what you're going for all the way through to making that decision and then reviewing that decision later and making sure that it worked. So all of these steps really start with that RFI process. So we want to start that first. And again, make sure that, if it's going to be open, you want to understand that it's going to be open to everybody and that you're going to encourage options so that you're not limiting yourself. I see a lot of sole source stuff coming out of the state of Mississippi, and that's because they've been locked into a certain vendor. So it is now a sole source RFQ, which kind of undoes the problem, because what happens if you start locking yourself in with a vendor, you really start losing that ability to negotiate, and vendors get in a cushy position and they know you can't do business anywhere else. So guess what happens to pricing and other options? It starts to creep up a little here and a little there and a little here and a little there. So you really want to make sure that, you know, you're giving yourself those options. And then round two, as you go to bid, make sure that you state that purpose and be specific. And again, ask for options. Just because you're looking for, you know, software package A or cloud solution A, and you're going out to multiple people to provide you that solution, still ask for options as you go to the RFQ, because things might have changed a little bit since you have the RFI process. And now that companies know that you're specifically looking for a quote, in a lot of cases, they're going to come back, and things that might have been a cost up front, they're willing to put in at no cost. And you'll find this a lot, you know, the difference between a 1-year contract and a 3-year contract. What you get in a 3-year contract, a lot of cases, is lower cost year over year and some extra features. And so once we move to that quote stage, we want to make sure we at least give them the option to start putting that stuff in. And so again, we want to start with very clear expectations, but not overly prescriptive that we can't change that. And so this is where this process becomes iterative from starting out through the RFQ. And there's lots of examples online. So, you know, don't feel like you're in this alone. You can always go out and Google and find, this was just one screenshot, and trust me, there was probably 100 more. And then you want to find out about the vendor company. Look at the expertise of the folks. How long have they been in business? How long has that product been around? And there's always new stuff. I mean, that's not to say you shouldn't use the new stuff, but at least warn yourself that it's new, right? How do they go to market? What's the local support structure? There's a lot of, you know, with cloud, things are available to everybody anywhere. It doesn't matter where you sit, but how are you going to get local support? Are you going to have to, you know, if it's an outsourced cloud halfway across the world, they're in a different time zone. And that needs to be a consideration, because nobody wants their support only at midnight. And so figuring out all of these things and how it's going to work for you. Codes and standards. If you're doing business in a different country, which you probably will be, we hope, as you move forward, you have to understand those codes and standards are very different in each individual country. And so picking partners that already do business in those countries sometimes can be of help to you, but certainly understanding what they are. And then, you know, anything unique. And again, that one most important question, what do you need from us to make this happen? And, you know, other complementary services, there might be other things. Always ask for direct pricing if you can. If they sell through a supply chain, that's the easiest way to make sure that you have control on what that pricing is. Supply chain doesn't like that, by the way, but it's your money. So there you have it. And then day two, you know, you need to be asking, as all of this, how often do I have to do maintenance? What is the move, add, and change requirement? What happens if the, you know, day one is warrantied and now I have somebody else do some of the work? Is that going to void my warranty? Can I become certified to do my own warranty stuff? How does that work, you know, going forward day two or day three? So for instance, just like buying a car, if you have a warranty on your motor and your engine, is it okay if you get oil changes from somebody up the street? Or do you have to go to some place that documents those oil changes, and what are those requirements so that they know those oil changes have been done so it doesn't void your warranty, those kind of things. Also, yeah, like here is a good thing. Hurricane, flood, tornadoes, heat, all of that is certainly important to make sure that it supports your local environment if it's going to be something physical. And then offloading workloads, you know, your project needs to start way before your project starts. I can't stress this enough. In your RFI, in your RFQ, especially in your RFQ cycle, ask for documentation. Ask for anything that's going to be part of your disaster recovery, business continuity plan. Ask for anything that, you know, you need to know. Where are my owner's manuals? Can I get all of this electronically, because you want it to be searchable? Certainly as you start building your disaster recovery plans, you know, you might not be able to get to your office. So you might need this somewhere else, and storing that in the cloud is a benefit. All of those things you need to start asking for, and get project plans from them. This is a great example. This is a construction management package. And it goes through everything. It documents all the meetings, all of the calendars, all of the drawings, all of the drawing changes. And then it goes all the way through. And now you can click on any piece of equipment and the owner's manual is stored graphically and electronically for every piece of equipment in there. Then that becomes part of the safety plan and part of the ongoing disaster recovery stuff for the site. So it really sort of builds on it. And the more support you can get from the vendors, especially if you don't have to pay for it, all you have to do is ask for it, do that. They're not, you know, a lot of vendors aren't going to offer it up if you don't ask for it, but if you ask for it, absolutely. Here's another good one. So I was working with a company that was looking for co-location space, and they happened to be in a small town, and we found a modular data center vendor that would build on site for them and turn over the management. So it became a co-location OpEx spend, but literally on site right out their back door. And so, you know, that ended up being significantly less, and they ended up building a little bit bigger building, and they leased out some of that space to somebody else that helped pay for that building. And so they kind of got more of the best of both worlds. They also ended up, because it was a smaller building and they could put in some of the stuff they wanted, being able to do this way more energy efficiently than they could have if they'd have moved into somebody else's facility. So all of those things are options. And, you know, in this particular case, they ended up putting in 4 of those data centers because that leased space turned out to be so energy efficient. They just kept moving and adding to it and adding to it. And this supported a smart city, a rural hospital, and, you know, some other really cool tech out there. And so, you know, working with people and getting outside of your hidden little circles sometimes brings some of these really great options to the forefront. So in summary, use your vendors. You know, use your vendors, but don't rely on them so much that they become really somebody that hooks you into a solution and you get nothing else. You should always have open conversations. You should always have multiple options on the table. And if you rely on your vendors too much, you're going to lose some of that. And, you know, like I said, if you have a procurement department, you probably will as you grow. If you don't now, make sure that they're involved very, very early on. If you're selling to another business, don't just talk to the department you need. Always interface with procurement, because they're absolutely going to have a say in that. Understand what the requirements are from procurement. Make sure that you can get on their approved vendor list, all that kind of stuff moving forward. So it's definitely 2 ways. And then, you know, look at disinterested third parties. If you need somebody to go do some of that legwork, don't cut yourself short. You can buy, you know, at $150, $200 an hour, you can buy 40 hours of somebody's time, and it might save you millions on the back end, or hundreds of thousands on the back end, just getting you into the solution that you really need. And again, if you don't have the money, you know, for disinterested third-party services, look to brokers. It's a good way to kind of shortcut that and get some of those solutions. And, you know, we always disclose if we get more from one particular company than another. I just think that's good business. Not all brokers do that, I don't think, but you know, just understand that definitely, you know, they can bring a lot of things to the table. And again, make sure you do the RFIs and don't just settle for a solution. So I left about 15 minutes for questions, and I am Johnny on the spot. So I do want to stress, if you guys want a copy of this presentation, I'm more than happy to share a PDF of this with you. I'm also happy to connect on LinkedIn. I think, you know, our networks grow as we grow, and it certainly brings about different solutions and thoughts. And my contact information is there too. So feel free to reach out. Janet, I see we have some questions.
We do. Carrie, do you want me to read those out loud, or do you want to read them and respond? How do you want to do that?
You can read them out. It'd be fine.
Yeah. Okay. So really kind of focus back on, like, if you're a startup, because a lot of our people listening are probably startups. And it says, as a startup, I need an IT partner and probably need them almost in-house eventually. How do I go about finding partners like that?
So it depends on what you're getting, right? So you can definitely start doing something like CTO as a service, where you get a day a week, a day a month, or you can work, there's, you know, different consulting firms that have just a whole swath of stuff under their umbrella. do an RFI, find out what their capabilities are, but understand what you're going to procure as tech, right? So there's going to be, it's very different if you're procuring cloud than if you're doing desktop services. You can also reach out to some of the junior colleges, because a lot of these kids in these IT classes want experience. And so, that's a good way sometimes to do, get somebody as an intern. I think you should always do paid internships if you can afford it, because I think asking people to work for free is no bueno, even if you're just giving them attaboy on the resume. But, junior colleges is a good way. Talk to some other folks that that are entrepreneurs in their companies and see what they're doing. I'd be happy to start setting up some workshops to individually go through some of this stuff. If that's helpful to you guys starting out, just reach out. I'll be glad to kind of talk you through some of those. But again, it depends on what you're going to have. And yes, you absolutely are going to end up with some IT skills and people. And as you grow, that's just going to grow. There's no business today that can succeed without tech.
I think that the next question is really a continuation of that one. Just, can bigger IT companies function as a startup partner? Or do we need to look at an individual IT who can work with us and hopefully come on board when we are better funded?
Yeah, so it really depends. Again, it depends on what your needs are. If you're looking for somebody to come in and set up desktops and, maybe set you up a server and that kind of stuff, you could have them pop in once a month to, a lot of those updates do themselves. If you're looking for somebody to do web development and maintain your website, that's certainly different. That'd be a different skill set that you might find in a different company. And, they'll, in their package, they'll have so many updates for you and certain things if you're trying to, build subscribers or whatever that is. So again, it depends. If you're, if you're doing salon services, the website route might get all the IT stuff you need. If you're writing a program to do something very specific, that's a whole different skill set. You're going to be hiring on programmers and stuff. So, definitely working with junior colleges, I think, and the college programs are a great way to help somebody build some of those skills. I think too, that we're really getting to a point where companies are going to do more skills-based hiring necessarily than degree-based hiring. And so helping somebody build those skills builds a loyalty with you. You can also offshore it, but just understand there's going to be time differences, and payment to offshore companies and all that kind of stuff becomes, certainly a consideration, although a lot of them work less than people in the US. So, and it just kind of depends on if you want to stay within your local region. Which I can honestly say Mississippi could use that. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you for that. Thank you. So the next question, you've already talked about IT brokers, but the questioner is asking if you can expand on that and talk a little bit more about how that works.
Okay, so just like you hire a broker when you're looking for a house. And they go out and they look at all these houses in the Jackson and surrounding area, and you tell them what you want. You tell them you want 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, a swimming pool, movie stars. I'm just kidding. Whatever that package is, that broker will go out and find those solutions for you. So when you have telecommunications brokers, like we have software-defined networking, telecommunications services, last mile, copper and fiber, software-defined wide area network, cloud-based services for what you want to do in the cloud, data center space, if you're looking at data center space. And so what we do is we look at all of those solutions that we have, all those vendors that are under our portfolio, and say that you want a cloud provider that is going to let you spin up a web server, and you're going to have, these certain requirements. We'll go out and find ones that do that and say, okay, well, this one includes security, this one includes this one includes this, and then we'll present you with a list of 4 or 5. If you're building out an office building and say you've got 10 people in your company and you want voice services and you want some of that to be web enabled, and you want, phones sitting on people's desks, but you also want them to have software phones so they can talk from their laptops and PCs, and you want to be able to do conferencing. put that package together. The brokers will go out amongst all of those different providers and bring something to you that's within your, within your budget, kind of with what you want. And then those companies pay the broker. You don't pay the broker, those other people do. And so as brokers, they have what's called spiffs. They're special pricing incentives. And, sometimes there's a spiff up front for one solution that might make it more attractive to a broker than another, but maybe not as attractive to you. I personally disclose, if one has a better incentive for me than another, because I don't want anybody to think I'm pushing a solution because it's better for me. I want people to understand that I'm presenting solutions that are better for them. And by the way, here's the different, stacks for me. And I feel like you should be up front, but that's how a broker works.
Awesome. Thank you for clarifying all of that. Another question came in: as a startup, I'd like to start a business specifically in the area of software testing, functional testing. How would I find partners to assist with that specifically?
Oh, so that would be, you could very easily reach out to software development companies, because a lot of them really cry for that. And I will say, having written software before, that having people that can do that functional testing that don't understand how the software is supposed to work provides you much better testing than the people that wrote the software that understand how it's supposed to work. So I would absolutely think, going out on LinkedIn, looking at software development firms, also reach out to some of the employers here that write their own code. So there's a lot of companies that don't use just commercial off-the-shelf stuff, or they do kind of the trend these days is what they call low code or no code. So, people go in and don't really write the actual code, but you pick and choose a little of this, a little of this, a little of this, a little of this, and they kind of do their own writing. And just say, look, if you guys are doing anything custom with software, we'd love to be that service for you. And make sure that you have a Mac, a iPad, probably an Android phone, an Apple phone, all the different a regular laptop, all of the things that it would be tested on, so that you can do testing in all the different environments that they would deploy on. And, but yeah, I think, you find software development companies, just do a search on LinkedIn. I would also suggest maybe joining some networking groups like AITP, any of the coding groups, working with Girls Who Code maybe as a mentor, and some of those coding organizations, because some of those kids turn around and start writing code, and by being a mentor, you get to network with other people that write code. So the trick is to get in front of people that do what you want to do. And I think those are all great ways to do it. I'm a firm believer in networking and networking groups. I think they're a great way to meet folks and express who you are. It's a lot better than trying to do a cold call or send a brochure around, because people see you.
Thank you for that, Carrie. I don't see any additional questions. Do you have any final closing remarks?
I will say that, like I said, the few things, if you really take nothing else away from this, take away that you have to give yourself time to buy the right thing. If you buy something just as a knee-jerk reaction, spur of the moment, the day after you buy that thing, you're going to find something that does it better, and something that maybe is more in your price range. So definitely allow yourself that opportunity to do that investigative work and figure out, what you're going to do and where you're going to be. And then always, always, always make sure, whenever you're buying anything that relates to your company, if it's an accounting package, if it's an accountant, ask them, what do you need from me to make this successful? Because if you don't support the people that are trying to support you, you cut them off at the knees. And that would be my biggest recommendations.
All right. Awesome. Thank you. Someone had just asked if we're going to be offering this recording of this presentation, and yes, we will. I have a list of everybody who's on. I have your email addresses, so I'll send everyone a copy. It's also going to be on our website, and if you click on the banner ad for Carrie's webinar, you'll see the recording there. We'll link the two. Carrie, thank you so much. We just really appreciate your time, the expertise. That was such an information-packed presentation, and we just are excited to have you involved with Innovate.
Thanks. I'm really excited to be involved. Like I said, it's nice to be doing projects in state instead of doing them elsewhere in the world. Although I will say, you know, the travel has been great, and I am blessed to have seen such a remarkable part of the world. But yeah, it's kind of nice to come home.
Yeah, awesome. Well, glad to have you. Everybody who's on, we just appreciate you being here. Stay tuned for updates on future events. We have Accelerate Virtual coming up November 10th and 11th. We'll be sending you all some information about there. Richard Hill on chat says, a shout out for Jackson Area Web and App Developers, which is a local meetup with some talented freelance and professional developers. So
there you go. There you go.
So there you go. Shout out for Jackson Area Web and App Developers.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of good meetups too. I forgot about that one, but there's quite a few good meetup groups too. I know Natalie's got one too, but yeah, there's lots of places to go. And if you get stuck, send me an email. I'll help you out.